Mayshings Serious Anime Tutorial Series Number 2, Bouncing Ball. For this tutorial, I want to cover the use of the bouncing ball principle, the squash and stretch, the similarities and the differences compared to an anime and the normal American cartoons. For the bouncing ball, I will introduce another terminology you will hear a lot, ease in and ease out. Ease in simply means slowly ease into motion. Ease out means slowly ease out of motion. When the ball is coming into arc of motion, there will be an ease in. When it's ending the motion, there will be an ease out. For the setup, I have a line for the ground layer. This is important for beginners because if you don't have a solid setup, your ground might shift as you animate, unless you already did this exercise before. I put in notches to indicate where the ball will move on the arc, and the notches indicate the center of the ball. As the ball starts falling, it will increase in speed over time, from slow to fast. In my limited knowledge of physics, I know the bouncing ball has at least two sources of energy that influence its falling action. One is the energy of motion called kinetic energy. The other is the Earth's own force of gravity. The pull from Earth causes the ball to move towards the ground, toward Earth's center, but the kinetic energy wants it to move forward instead. This causes a conflict and creates a slower moving ball at the top of the motion arc. And the ball moves faster toward the ground because now the kinetic energy and the gravity pull are added together. It's the same for anyone that's jumping or moving the arc of motion. This law of physics applies in animation. A very common problem a beginning animator may run into for the bouncing ball exercise is, how much should the ball squash and how much should it stretch? Unless you are tracing, which I don't encourage you to, you are likely to find your ball changing sizes when you are twinning. In order to avoid tracing and keeping the ball at relatively the same size, I use the motion arcs. Instead of 2 motion arcs I used in a pendulum swing, I'll use 3 motion arcs here. Once you get used to the motion arc concept, you can do this exercise with probably just 1 motion arc. I personally still had to use 2 just to make sure the ball doesn't get too fat or too small. For now, I placed 1 motion arc for the top of the ball, another for the bottom of the ball, and 1 for the center. When you use the motion arcs to guide the ball, you have a more solid grasp of its size and keeping the center of the ball on track. When the ball is coming down, we can increase the speed by having more distance between the drawings and squash it on impact. A ball squashing on contact with the floor is something that actually happens in real-life physics. If you search ball on impact or ball compression, you'll find pictures of golf balls or soccer balls being squashed when something hits it. I'm not going to explain the physics in detail, but for animation, I generally only squash the object for about 20%, so I can maintain the look of the overall ratio. One thing I want to mention about this practice is, when you do the squash and stretch, keep in mind not to make it too subtle that people can't differentiate, which would defeat the purpose of squash and stretch. And don't over-exaggerate. No lemon shape! And seriously, I did see some practices where the ball turned into a lemon shape. And football, whatever it is, this is not a transformation animation, and so be careful about shape warp. Try to stay with the same ball shape. If you want to do a transformation animation, we will discuss it later. It's a different assignment. If you want to exaggerate the deformity of the ball, usually a change of gravity or pressure should be involved for people to believe your ball is bent out of shape for a reason, like someone kicking a ball. Otherwise, you will take the viewer out of your reality, and they will just think it's looking weird, or it's a bad drawing due to the obvious change of volume. If you're at the very beginning of practice in maintaining proportion, and have trouble maintaining the length of the ball even with the extra motion arcs in place, I would suggest you use a ruler or pencil or your finger to measure diameter of the first ball you have. After you draw a few balls, checking back and forth with the measurement in place, you'll be able to draw with similar size for the next few drawings. For 2D animation, you really don't need to keep the drawings 100% accurate for the drawings to work. Only 3D animation can keep 100% accuracy. Provided that the 3D rigs don't bend out of shape when you animate, the 3D animators will know the horrors of which I speak of. 2D animation allows us to have the control to morph and change objects quickly because of this inaccuracy. That's the strength of 2D animation. We should take advantage of it. If you can keep your drawings at about 90 to 95% accuracy, it's already professional enough. You don't need to fuss over very small details and changes in size, length, and so on between each drawing, as some of you perfectionists out there would attempt. I know it's extremely easy for beginners to fuss over small imperfections and get frustrated on this exercise. The key idea is to try to stay relaxed with your lines and be very gestural about it, and avoid tracing. Like I mentioned before, tracing will not increase your skill for size accuracy between drawings, and it's really crucial to train it right now. And if you're already really challenged by not tracing the ball on this exercise, you need to practice some gesture drawings, which is keeping your lines flowing on the page. I will provide some links here for you to check out some web pages that introduce gesture drawing and its practices. And if you are using Flash to do this practice, on computer, don't use the shape tool. You can use the pen tool and the brush tool, and just try not to use those settings where the lines will look perfect. You don't need perfect lines for this. After you finish the bouncing ball, you can move on to applying it to a character. I did one with my character Ding Ding for my series Edap's Angel. She is now flying in and bouncing off to the side. For the fun of it, I added a few more drawings of Ding Ding on impact, rolling to the side and bounce off again. When she is rolling on the floor on impact, I changed the timing between each drawings from 2s to 1s. Why is this 2s and 1s? That's part of animators' terms on timing. This is a crucial term. An animation on 2s means 2 frames per drawing in a sequence when it's filmed. On 1s simply means 1 frame per drawing, which is the most detailed animation frame rate. In the past, when animation was still done on film and camera, the animators have to shoot pictures of their drawings. When it's on 2s, they shot the drawing twice on camera. When it's on 1s, they shot it only once. That's how this term 1s and 2s and 3s come about. But they still use camera nowadays, but it's just mostly in traditional schools and it's rare. You can also have 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, and 8s. This is just a term we use for communicating what we are going to do. When the director tells you to animate on 4s, it means it's going to be mostly keyframe, a drawing for every 4 frames. When the director tells you the sequence is going to be on 1s, it means it's going to be a lot of work. For this sequence, when Ding Ding is flying in and dropping to the floor, I have a movement on 2s, and when she's rolling on the floor, I have it on 1s to be slightly faster. My frame rate for this sequence is about 30 frames a second. I like using 30 frames per second because it's easier with math. Even though the classical animation, the 24 frames per second is the classical frame rate, now with computer we can have 30, we can have 60, we can have 90. I like sticking with 30, which is easier to figure out exactly how many frames I need for a certain amount of time without using the calculator, and it's just easier overall, and it's not as crazy as 60 frames per second. Okay, Ding Ding, don't hog the camera. Go back to work. For a character like Ding Ding, she's made of 2 balls in her body as the basic structure. It's also close to a peanut shape or pillow shape. This is the basic cartoon shape that allows for a lot of movement in animation. You can try to animate a simple character of your own like this, bouncing off to the side. For the advanced artists, animating a complex human character doing a bounce toward the ground in perspective can be really fun. In anime, a human character doesn't usually squash and stretch as obviously like an average American cartoon character. Instead, the squash and stretch is applied to poses. Using the change of exaggerated poses, an animator can express the principle of squash and stretch. Generally, the characters are kept in normal proportion until an unusual force is applied to them. That's all for now. On the next episode, I will talk about secondary action, which is where you deal with ears, hair, clothing, and wind. In anime, the secondary action is often the most detailed and the most exaggerated part of the animation. It's the basic principle that makes an anime looking cool or beautiful. But you will all start with the very basic and modest flag exercise.